Hi guys, how you doing? Firstly, it's ridiculously hot, and as you can see I'm filming in the conservatory, so I've got all the doors and windows open. Please excuse if there's any background noise. You might just be able to make out some noise from the main road out the front. I promised you a review of my new sword, so that's what I'm here to talk about today. This is it. It's a blunt sparring English backsword made by Marco Danelli of Danelli Armories. The simple review is, I love it, it's great. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's not based off any individual sword, it's based off a sort of composite of 3 or 4. There are a number of surviving swords. There's the relatively famous Mary Rose sword, but there are a number of others in other collections. What I did is I sent a lot of photos to Marco, and we had a bit of a chat about what he wanted to do and how we wanted it and which things I specifically wanted. He'd made one similar to this before, but a little bit more simple, and I wanted something a little bit more complex. So once we'd agreed on a design, he set about making it. As you can see, it's fairly pretty. It's got a nice basket with ribs at the front. It's got a crossguard as well. It's got a circular pommel. I don't know if you can see from there, but the ends of the basket aren't actually attached to the pommel. As Marco tends to do, the end of the pommel is held in place with a little pommel nut. I don't know if that's in focus or not, but you can probably see it. Now it looks pretty good. When you look closely at it, you can see what it actually is. It's a modern locking nut that's been probably put on a drill or on a lathe of some sort and made round, so that at first glance it looks pretty authentic. But it does mean that if at any point you need to disassemble the hilt, you can just get a pair of grips on there and unscrew that and take the whole hilt apart. The grip is bound in leather. It's very basic, it's pretty cheap, it feels quite nice in the hand. I'll probably redo it at some stage to make it a little prettier, but it's certainly not urgent because it does the job. The basket itself I've made somewhat larger than the originals, for the main reason that not only have I got relatively big hands, but I have in the past been stabbed through the gaps in the basket, so I wanted to make sure that there was room for a fairly sturdy glove in there as well as my hand. So that's not quite as authentic as perhaps you'd like, but I get to use it when it's made this way. The whole thing weighs in at approximately 1.3 kilos, which is just a smidge under 3 pounds. It's 42.5 inches long from the end of the pommel to the tip. And the blade length is 36 inches, which is pretty much perfect for me. It's about what I like it to be. So it's a relatively sturdy sword. As you can probably see, it's not been made as a backsword, it's been made as a double-edged sword, so I suppose it's probably a side sword blade, but it's a pattern that Marco is very familiar with and makes a lot of, so that's what we went for. From the point of view of it being a sparring blade, it doesn't actually matter to me one way or another, and it helped keep the price down a little. Like almost all of his blades, it doesn't have a rolled tip, it has a spread tip, so it's quite thick on the tip there. I don't know if you can see that. I'll try and hold it up against my t-shirt so you can see. It's got a nice amount of flex in it, as you can see, so it's fairly safe in the thrust. The point of balance is pretty much exactly where you'd expect it to be, which is just past the end of the ricasso, about there. And it's a lovely sword. It's fairly chunky. If you're used to the synthetic nylon swords that the Night Shop make, the Rawlings range, then this is going to feel a little different. But that's a good thing, because whilst they're fantastic as an entry-level model to get you going and to have something with a complex hilt at a relatively affordable price, they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and this is a huge step up. I'm really very pleased with it, and the heat treat seems to be pretty good. One of the worries with custom-made swords is that the heat treatment's potentially going to be dodgy. But one of the guys in my club has a very chunky Sinclair hilted sabre, and I must admit I was a little concerned about whether this fairly delicate blade would stand up against his sabre, and so far it seems to have. You can see, looking at the edges, there's been a bit of action, but nothing that's done any significant damage. So for now, I'm very happy with it. I strongly recommend, Marco Danelli, if you're going to look at getting yourself a sword, especially an English backsword, because he's made a couple of these hilts now, mine and a much simpler one. They're not cheap as swords go, but in all honesty, decent swords aren't cheap. And I suspect, bearing in mind how busy Marco is, that they're only going to get more and more expensive. His waiting time is remarkable now. I think you're looking at mid to late 2017 if you want to get a sword from him, which is no surprise. What tends to happen is a new maker hits the market and people like this stuff, and they get a few orders relatively quickly and they struggle to keep up with them. And if they do manage to keep up with them and maintain the quality, then they get a lot more orders, they get a bit of a reputation, and suddenly they're almost impossible to get swords from, because people are happy to place an order and wait 2-3 years to get their sword. I can't think of a better sparring sword that follows this pattern, this English basket hilt. I don't think I've ever come across one. So I've already put an order in for another, slightly different pattern, and if and when it ever arrives, I'll let you know. But for now, yeah, 10 out of 10, Marco. It's fantastic. It's a brilliant sword. I love it very much, and I hope that you get one from him and you love it too. Anyway, I'll shush now because the wind's just blown my conservatory door closed and it's starting to get really very hot in here. So take care. I'll see you soon, guys.